Okay, so the first market structure we'll analyze is firms in perfect competition. And it's important to remember that this is mostly a theoretical framework for analysis. It's highly unlikely that this structure is going to exist in reality. In saying that, it is important to study this theoretical framework, as once this model is built, we can start to relax some of the strict assumptions that are made and move towards models of markets that are much more realistic. The closest industry to perfect competition in reality, which is used by economists as an example, is the agricultural industry. So we'll do the same when we take a look at some of the assumptions of our market in perfect competition. As we go through them, we'll be thinking of the market for wheat as an example. First up, the industry is made up of a very large number of firms. Yes, for our example, there are some large wheat farms, but in comparison to the entire wheat growing industry, they are very small. Next up, we've got mostly homogeneous products, and firms are price takers. Individual firms need to sell at whatever price is set by the market as a whole, and products are identical. No single farm is able to affect the price of wheat in the market, as it's not going to shift the industry supply curve. In addition, you know, wheat is wheat. There's no way to tell one farm's wheat from the other. There are no barriers to entry or exit in this market. Existing firms have no way to stop new firms from entering, and they're also free to leave the industry if they wish. This is where our assumptions start to break down in reality, as even though firms are relatively free to enter or exit the wheat industry, there are significant costs in doing either. Finally, all producers and consumers have perfect information. For example, they are fully aware of prices, the industry, the quality of products, and the availability of goods. In reality, this is unlikely to be the case. So what we have here is our perfect competition market in the long run, where there's long run equilibrium. It can be defined as where normal profit is being made, and normal profit for our purposes here is going to be where average costs are equal to average revenue. Any profit outside of normal profit is a short run equilibrium, which we'll develop later on in the video. We can see from the diagrams that we have the total industry on the left of the market and the firm on the right. And the firm is pretty clearly taking the price that the market has set. The industry or the market itself produces the output Q or capital Q, and the individual firm produces output lowercase q, which reflects the firm's output as lower and significantly lower than that of the entire market. So we don't need to understand what's going on in these diagrams right now. However, what we do want to know is that abnormal profit and negative profit, or sometimes called a loss, can't last in the long run. We're always going to end up back to this point of long run equilibrium where normal profit is being made and our average cost is equal to our average revenue. First up, we're going to take a look at abnormal profit, and there are a couple of important things to note here. Firms for us are always going to produce at the profit maximizing point, which is where marginal costs are equal to marginal revenue, and abnormal profits are going to occur when average cost is less than average revenue. You must also remember when drawing a diagrams to make sure that the marginal cost curve cuts the average cost curve at its lowest point. So we'll take a look at what that looks like now. For a firm to be making abnormal profit, average cost is going to have to be below average revenue. So we'll draw our average cost curve, quite a fair way below the average revenue curve, like so. Draw it just like that, or it's a little bit wonky actually. I might have another crack at that. So average costs, below average revenue. Next, we'll have a look and we'll add in our marginal cost curve. And remember, this is going to intersect average cost at its lowest point. So I'm going to see my lowest point for average cost, being just about here. So my marginal cost curve is going to come up and intersect at that point. Now, as our firm is aiming to profit maximize, they're going to produce where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, which gives us our profit maximizing quantity. So we can illustrate that where our marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue and our profit maximizing quantity at Q2. At this point, it should be clear for us to see where abnormal profit is. If we compare our average revenue and average costs, we can see that average revenue is greater than average cost, and the vertical distance between them is the unit abnormal profit. So we can see where average cost is here and average revenue is there. If we multiply that unit by the quantity Q2, we can take this point across all the way to our axes, and I might label this C. The rectangle that is left gives us the area of abnormal profit that's being made by the firm. So this area here is all abnormal profit. This is only a short run position for the firm. It's never going to last in the long run. There are two really important reasons for this. The amount of abnormal profit that exists in the market is going to attract other firms into the market who are eager to earn some of these higher profits. They have the ability to do so as there are no barriers to entry and there's perfect information of market conditions available. As they enter the market, the impact on the industry is that the supply curve is going to shift to the right. And as it does so, the market price will begin to fall, which will eliminate abnormal profits. The best way for us to draw this situation and the return to long run is in reverse. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the new revenue curve. And I'm going to make sure that that is the point where average cost is equal to average revenue. So my new revenue curve is going to be there. And it's going to be under the original average revenue curve. So I'm going to take that, forgive this for not being perfectly straight. I'm going to take that all the way out to there. I'm going to label this, D1 equals AR1 equals MR1. And this lower average revenue curve is going to reflect the change in price to P1. This lower price would have come from the market, which we can actually draw across all the way here. And we see that the lower price would have come from the increase in supply due to all the new entrants into the market. So where the price intersects our demand curve is going to give us the origin of our new supply curve. And so I'll make sure that that's nice and parallel there. And we can see the increase in supply is due to the increased number of firms in the market. So the only thing left for us to do now is to draw our new quantity points. So we can see that for the market, there's a much larger industry with a much greater output. And we can see that's illustrated by the change in quantity, uppercase quantity from, I would say, Q1 to Q3. But we see the quantities decrease for the firm. So where marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue on our new revenue curve, let's call this Q4. So this is illustrating our much larger industry producing Q3 units with a greater number of smaller firms, each producing Q4 units. In this situation, entrepreneurs of firms are satisfied as they're covering their opportunity costs and there is no more abnormal profit to attract more firms in the industry. So we've settled at our long run equilibrium, which is now at a lower price. Okay, so the other short run situation which we can encounter is a firm to be making a loss. To illustrate this situation, we're going to draw our average cost curve above the average revenue curve, which reflects that average costs are greater than average revenue. Our marginal cost, as always, is going to cut the average cost curve at its lowest point. The firm, again, is a profit maximizer, so it's going to produce at where marginal cost equals marginal revenue at Q1, lowercase q1. To find our negative profit, we need to compare our average costs and our average revenue. And we'll see that average cost is indeed much higher than where average revenue is. So that's our unit loss, looking at where average cost is and where average revenue is. When we multiply by output Q1, we can see that our, we'll call this C again, we can see that the total amount of loss in the market is represented by the rectangle that is shown. Loss, let's call that loss. Again, this will only occur in the short run. Firms will be incentivized to leave this market due to the losses being made and that there are no barriers to exit. Entrepreneurs will leave to produce their opportunity cost instead, as the next best alternative becomes more attractive on a profit basis. As more and more firms leave, the market supply curve will shift to the left, which increases market price. Price will increase until there is normal profit again, which is the point that no more firms will exit the market as they are satisfied and opportunity costs are covered. So again, we'll draw this backwards. We can find normal profit as the point where average costs equals average revenue. And we know that this price would have come from the market. So our new revenue curve will be where average costs equals average revenue. We'll call this P1. And we can take this price across, forgive the accuracy, into the market here. So we'll call this D1 equals AR1 equals MR1. So the increase in price is reflective of the fact that supply would have decreased due to the losses in the market. And we can see our new supply curve is going to be parallel to the original S1. And we've drawn that where the new price has intersected the demand curve. Now, again, we just need to add our quantities. In the market, there's going to be a lower amount of output overall at Q3. So Q1 is decreased to Q3. And in our individual firm market, we can see that quantity for the firm would have increased slightly from Q2 to Q4. So we now have the situation where the market overall will produce a lower quantity Q3, and we have some slightly larger individual firms which will be producing at Q4 units. So we can see that in situations of both abnormal profit and loss, that the individual firm will always revert back to the long run equilibrium due to the way that losses and abnormal profits incentivize firms either in the market or looking to enter the market, and the fact that there are no barriers to entry or exit in the perfect competition market. Okay, so now that we understand the theory, we can do some analysis of the model. We can achieve this by looking at some basic pros and cons, or some insights and limitations of the model. So, some insights. We can see that, allocative efficiency is achieved by the market in perfect competition. It leads to the optimal allocation of resources achieved by price being equal to marginal costs, or marginal benefits being equal to marginal costs in the long run equilibrium. There are low prices for consumers, which is due to the absence of abnormal profits in the long run. There is the close down of inefficient producers. Firms that are inefficient produce at higher than necessary costs, whose revenues are insufficient, leading to closure. And finally, the market will respond to consumer tastes. Changes in consumer demand will lead to changes in market price, which create short-run abnormal profits or losses. As a result, long-run changes to equilibrium can be seen from changes to consumer demand. Some limitations of the model now. There are quite unrealistic assumptions. As we saw with the example of wheat, most of the assumptions made in perfect competition are rarely met in the real world. Firms cannot take advantage of economies of scale. Firms are too small to grow to a size large enough to have economies of scale in this market. There's a lack of product variety. So our homogeneous products offer no variety for consumers, which decreases choice. And there's also limited product development. The lack of abnormal profits in perfect competition means that necessary funds for research and development aren't available, and there's no incentive for firms to actually, try to reinvest in product development. And that's our market in perfect competition. We'll use this as the starting point for our study of market structures, and now we'll move forward onto other types of markets that exist.